Yes. I'd like to call the meeting back to order.
You're welcome to our video setting meeting. Lesson today, will be done by me. Lord, thank you for this school, for the master school. Lord, have us come to this video setting tonight. Good wise decisions for our vision. Yeah. Now we're going to go to dinner break. Okay. Take a break from the calls. Anthony, are you ready? Well, Jessica's jumping in to get ready, right? Take it a while, Lee.
My letter. Right. I'm messing with it.
Y'all get ready to have all make sure you press in. Take it up here. On the mic. Okay. Yeah. Make sure you're talking to the mic. And then also to council that you will wait to make notes of what you want to ask a question about. But we're going to go through the presentation and all of them, and then we'll come back and ask questions. Okay. I got it. Okay. If you do that presentation, then you will have an opportunity to ask a question. So let them go through their presentation first, Anthony, Jessica, and Terry, and we will ask questions. Okay?
Mayor, council, I know there is some overlap in the presentation. So I guess my thought was sometimes, we can do something with Anthony, some people say it was like, making an item in there that we're ready to talk about in vision setting. And then also get picked up in our vision setting, housing. So if it's obviously an item of clarity or whatnot, it's presentation, that's really good. I was really talking about getting down to setting up a vision.
But again, it's good with fixing it. That's
That's a fact. I would really like to have one person coming, then I can ask questions. And me, that's the way I understand.
It's okay if you ask a question, and it's something that's very covered in there. You can say, how we're going to do it, or
I don't have much to
well, no, I mean, certainly more questions are comfortable. I guess I was just suggesting that if you're going to do sort of that, and presentation. So, what is that? So, that's fine. We work around it.
what is y'all preference?
It's probably just, y'all just,
What is it? Floor is open. I need help.
I like the way that we always do
That's sort of the way I was just trying to say, there's more overlap probably this year by virtue of several things that go on. That's why I think bring it up. It's not necessarily changing it. Sometimes we can get ahead of ourselves. That's the only thing that I'm.
something like that.
Have that open dialogue with you.
Don, having y'all on cue, y'all ready?
You have to just make sure that y'all speak into the mics so that people can hear the screen.
Okay, all right. Yes, okay, great.
You do need an agenda again, so.
Can you hear me? Okay, all right, sorry about that. Opening back up the vision setting meeting for the town of Winterville. Next up is approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Got a motion made by Councilwoman Robinson, second by Councilman Rice. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Item for discussion is up now. Okay. It says safe routes to school application. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tonight for you, opportunity for the town to be involved in the same route school. They cross school grant application.
The deadline for this is February, February 6th. That's why we added it to this agenda instead of your regular scheduled meeting in February. The situation with this is we have somebody who's willing to write the grant and working with East through the with Ellen Walston. So basically, there's Pitt County is also involved with Alice King and the town of Winterville. And the intent is to apply for the grant that will cover not construction, but the administrative side of the grant application and management, helping with coordinating bicycle rodeos or working with engineers to develop where crosswalks should be in the Safe Routes to School program. In order for them to submit the grant application, they need a resolution from the town of Winterville endorsing the program. Yeah, the resolution should have been provided. Yeah, so the motion was to endorse the grant application.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we're going to go over the status of the budget, State of the Union. I'm going to start the presentation. Anthony's going to drive the slides for me, and then he's going to finish up with some factors for next year and kind of what we're looking at. So we'll start with the revenues. We'll go over the general, recreation, electric, water, sewer, and stormwater funds. For the general fund, the revenues are on target for the current fiscal year. As of the end of January, we'll have completed about 58% of the year. Revenues are currently at 56% of the total revenue budget, with budgeted interfund transfers accounting for 12.4% of the general fund revenues. Our property tax revenue is at about 96% of the budget.
Our vehicle property tax is currently on target for what is expected for this time of the year. We're averaging about 60,000 monthly, which is approximately 9,000 more than where we were last year. Local option sales tax is currently about 58% of the estimated budget. Utility franchise taxes are on target with relation to budget estimates. The general fund is balanced with the $507,000 fund balance appropriation, which is up from about $37,000 from the prior year. It is balanced with electric fund contribution of $650,000. For the recreation fund, there's $184,000 used from retained earnings to balance the recreation fund budget. The recreation fund has collected about 75% of budgeted revenues. Many of the program revenues are collected in the spring. 72% of recreation revenues are transferred from the general fund. Our electric fund has sales revenues that are currently on target with expectations in the amount of about $6.6 million. Revenues are at 60% with 58% of the year billed. $3.5 million from retained earnings was used to balance the electric fund. The water fund is on target with water sales at 50% for the year. Our current sales are at $781,000. The water fund used $123,000 of retained earnings to balance that budget. Moving on to the sewer fund. The sewer fund sales are also on target with $1.2 million, which is about 52% of the sales budgeted for the year. And that fund was balanced with $390,000 from retained earnings. Stormwater billings are $250,000 or 50% of the budget. And there was $37,000 from retained earnings used to balance that budget. Moving on to expenditures, we'll go through the same funds again. For the general fund, at this point in the year, we've had about 4 budget amendments, and we're expecting probably about 2 more before the end of the year. The general fund has spent 49% of the funds that were appropriated so far, and we're still expecting more capital outlay purchases. Recreation fund is currently lower than normal with 32% of the yearly appropriations having been spent. $370,000 of the $1.3 million budgeted has been spent, and capital spending for recreation this year is estimated to be about $237,000. For our electric fund, the purchase for resale line item is ahead of target, including that $1 million amendment. That was for the first 6 months. $2.8 million of the $5.5 million has been spent. This is 52% of the budget for the year. Goes back to what we've talked about in the last several meetings with the fluctuations in natural gas prices, and that will continue to drive this line item. Total fund expenditures is at 58% of the appropriations for the year, and that total budget is $10.8 million. For the water fund, the total expenditure is at 85% of the appropriation for the year. That purchase for resale line item is at 48% of the budget for the year, with $224,000 of the $472,000 having been spent. That fund budget is $1.7 million. For the sewer fund, it has currently spent 65% of its annual appropriation. The CMSD expense is 31% of the annual budget. Sewer fund budget is $2.8 million. The stormwater fund has spent 43% of its annual appropriation of $572,000, and the largest appropriation in the stormwater fund is the contribution for services at $129,000. Moving on to our fund balance status, our unassigned fund balance as of 6/30/2022 was 118%, which is up from 103 in 2021. The town appropriated $507,000, up from $469,000, which is a $37,000 increase to balance the budget this year, and that unassigned fund balance is $10.7 million or 62% of the annual operating expense. The fund balance percentage presented for the general fund includes the recreation fund, and the recreation fund has a reserve right now of $159,000. The Powell bill fund has a fund balance of $479,000. The electric fund has unrestricted retained earnings in the amount of $7.7 million, and that's 72% of the annual operating budget. Water fund has retained earnings in the amount of $1.9 million, and that's 115%. Sewer fund has a retained earnings in the amount of a negative $467,000, or a negative 17%. That's down from 45% of last year. Last year at this time, it was around $698,000, and that negative is because we're waiting on the proceeds for the capital project, so that won't stay in the negative. The stormwater fund has retained earnings in the amount of $1.1 million, and that's 1.98%. And then Anthony was going to take over for the factors for next year.
Thank you, Jessica. She's going to drive for me, return the favor here in a second when she gets over there. And so after we go through revenues and expenditures every year, we like to talk about, as we roll into our budget process, what are we facing as a town? What are we getting ready to, issues we're going to have to address, and what kind of decisions are going to have to be made. And so what we'll do in the next few slides is walk through several of the concerns that have been discussed over the last few months and last few years, and also items that come from internally within the organization and needs that will be have to be addressed as we move forward in time. So factors for next year, we always like to look at our debt situation. Unfortunately, we only have one loan that's going to be paid off next year. That's in our electric fund. That loan, the annual debt service payment is $54,086, and that's for electric line truck. So we have a lot of unfunded commitments. Ms. Parker and I talked earlier today, and she's kind of alluded to it already about how what she's going to present to you and what I'm going to present to you may cross paths a little bit, and that's okay because, we felt like, these issues were important enough to hear them multiple times. The old tar road widening project it's going to affect our utilities as well as the pedestrian plan. DOT is certainly moving forward with that finally after many years of waiting for funding. We have obviously CMSD commitments. We don't know a great number of issues coming out of CMSD for this coming up fiscal year, but certainly in the years after, there's going to be some major projects going on at CMSD and improvements, and those are on the horizon. We have a pump station capacity project, which is going to affect our Church Street pump station as well as Chapman Street pump station and increase capacity there. That project is $5,750,000. With our current number of customers, that's $5 per month per customer, just to cover the debt service. So the debt service is roughly $260,000 a year. That is being financed by Division of Water Quality, and that's a 20-year loan and a $500,000 debt forgiveness. The annual debt service payment, that's $262,500. Other unfunded commitments, MS4 stormwater. One of the issues there is going to be staffing because we have so many regulations. It's going to be tracking data on what part of our stormwater system is being maintained, and there's going to be a lot of data going along with this, and this is going to have to be submitted to the feds. multi-purpose facility, these are unfunded high priorities. These are items that we've heard the council talk about in the past and staff as we look at, like I said, internally what we need. The multi-purpose facility has been a high priority for many years.
All right,
All right.
Space, let's treat us going. You're welcome.
Stand by them, this technical difficulties. We now have acquired the land. The town has recently closed on that property, and now we have a place to move forward. Along with a facility like that, it's not just building a facility and you're done. It's a matter of how you staff it, what kind of operations programs, and your annual maintenance costs that go along with that. So it's not just paying for the debt service on the building. It's, everything that goes along with it to make it a useful facility. Cemetery development and maintenance costs, that's still progressing. The pedestrian and street improvement program, downtown parking, that is really starting to, in its infancy, is starting to come together. I know the council has really made an emphasis on these in many various pieces, but it's not really been pulled together into one big plan. And Safe Routes to School, if we were able to get that grant, tying that all in, creating one master plan, and then finding a way to move forward with that. Stormwater Railroad Street project, the council has already engaged with the Wooten Company. This was on last month's agenda. We're currently looking at increasing capacity in the Railroad Street area and in Tenoble Canal. So those projects are tied together. I've just finished a grant last week. Been working on it. We made it to the next round last week. Had to make adjustments last week. It's a $7 million grant through Department of Public Safety. And unfortunately, a lot of this, we're having to wait to find out if we're going to get these grants. And, waiting is not always the easiest thing to do. So we'd like to throw some questions out to you toward the end of the presentation about how we want to handle that. But essentially, what are we going to do if we don't get the grants, and how we're going to move forward. So that's a huge project. Like I said, the engineering has already started. That contract is underway, and they have 8 months to complete the design. Fire training ground, that's been an item of discussion for many years. Electric power cost adjustment. As we talked about in last month's meeting, we're monitoring this closely. We have done some preliminary work. We haven't calculated the bills for this month, but I will go ahead and take this opportunity to put everybody on guard. Your phones are going to be ringing. The cold spell that we had those 4 days during Christmas, everybody was home, nobody was at school, so thermostat stayed up and heaters ran. And so the town of Winterville's cost grew exponentially. And so when we got the bills, we were not happy ourselves with what we had to pay. And so we can tell you that there are many, many bills that are going to be very high. And so, one thing we might want to consider is if we want a payment plan option for the next month or two until we can get through this bad period. Again, natural gas prices have started coming back now, so our monthly electric costs, since it's generated by natural gas, as we monitor that, maybe we can address that power cost adjustment. But that power cost adjustment is going to be substantial this month. Sanitation services. I have another slide that I'll get into that in a minute, but DFL, there's a couple issues there. One is what we're billing per month versus what they're charging us. And two, as we grow, we've got to consider restructuring how the town goes about working with GFL or whatever the contractor is to manage pickup days, so that we're outgrowing what their capacity is as far as operations from their perspective. So that basically means more routes on different days. Public facility improvements, that's a big one. I think when we did the addition to the town hall and added the operations center, which is probably the last time we made major investments in our public facilities here at the town. And so that's been many years ago, and it's getting to the point where there's going to be some needs. That'll be addressed later as well. So some areas of concern, focusing on street improvement. This is one of the things, as I got involved in my new role, realized that we needed to probably find a different route or different method on addressing some of these concerns. And so what we'd like to hear, and we don't have to talk about it now, we can talk about it then or now at the end, but you know, one of the things we realize is that our POW bill program is not necessarily getting us where we need to be with our streets and our sidewalks. And so in the past, the town has simply waited for POW bill funds to build up, take 2 or 3 years off, not do anything, and then go do something. And so as we found this year really quickly, if you get it close to the railroad track, it's going to eat up your money. And so waiting on bids to come back for the improvements that we've got for the POW bill program for last year. But one thing I'd like to see is if the town would consider setting up a program or plan saying, hey, we want a 10-year plan, we'll do 10% every year for outside of POW bill. And so that way these streets and sidewalks we can get improvements in areas that we hadn't been able to get to because we've never focused on anything but other than the POW bill funds, which is just a small portion of what we need to do the job. So sanitation, kind of move on to that. We're projecting a loss of $1.63 per resident per month this year. So we're at $11.50 currently per every month. And it sounds small, but when you annualize that over the whole town, it's $78,000 that we're losing. And this is, when you consider it, compare it to our tax rate, it's nearly 1 cent on the tax rate. So if we were to have a tax rate increase, 1 cent will give us about $87,000. And so there's 1 cent on your tax right there. Other areas of concern, we've talked about the Railroad Street project. How does the council want to move forward if we're not able to obtain the grants we've applied for? So we've applied for AIA grants, and we've also applied for the Department of Public Safety. You know, is the town willing to take out private loans to finish the project? Is the town wanting to wait for DWI to, you know, give us a loan through their process, which is much more cumbersome and takes a lot longer? Or, you know, is the town ready to do some general obligation bonds to cover all these issues and wrap it into one bond that would go out to the citizens to vote on? Just what do y'all have an appetite for? Where are y'all with, you know, trying to make these projects get to the finish line? Public buildings, again, public works facility, our electric facility, fire training ground, fuel station. All of those are in much need of repair. Purchase of land for utilities, police, fire, and rec. So you may be wondering, like, well, we just bought land. Why are we talking about the need for more? And what we've done a lot of as staff lately is looked about what our build out is, where we're going to be 20 years from now. And 20 years from now, if we don't do something now, we're not going to have the land and the place to do, because it's going to be built out. It's going to be sold to somebody else, to a private developer. So we have needs from the utility side, whether it be a place for a water tower or a new well. We're having some constraints in the police fire facility with as we grow in there as well. And then recreation is always a hot topic. So again, land, they're not making any more of it. And there's only so many times, at least, I mean, I've been here 24 years. I can count on one hand how many times people come to town willing to sell land to us. So it hasn't been a very frequent thing. And so if there are opportunities, we really need to consider those seriously and really plan for the future. Okay. So some external factors, kind of getting into the economy at this point. Housing permits issued by the planning department decreased from 109 in 2022. It decreased to 109, down from 130 in 2021. The unemployment rate in Greenville is 3.7%, slightly up from 3.4. And sales tax revenue should be stable, but that's uncertain. I mean, a lot of our sales tax is driven on the home market. It's also driven by, just general purchases, consumer confidence, and things of that nature. So as we move into the budget for next year, we probably will be very cautious in our sales tax revenue because it's so dependent on what happens here in Pitt County with sales tax. We've been pretty lucky in the last couple of years, really since COVID. I don't know if y'all remember, but when we got hit with COVID, our sales tax revenue went through the roof, and that was because of all the stimulus money that started rolling out really fast. And now we're kind of leveling back off, but we're leveled off at a higher level than where we were prior. And so I'm a little concerned if we do roll into a recession, which has been talked about by some, how that's going to affect our sales tax revenue. So we'll probably be a little conservative as we roll into the budget on that this year. So overall, economists seem to be uncertain about the growth potential for North Carolina next year. There are concerns over a potential recession, and this creates uncertainty as to what housing and vehicles will do, along with everything else. But those are the two major drivers that really affect our budget locally. The Federal Reserve is expected to roll out more interest rate increases. They are expected to be smaller and not as strong as they have been in the past. And obviously that will be monitoring that based on the rate of inflation. Inflation is still continuing to drive up costs of projects along with supply chain problems. Other external factors. So our consumer price index for the past 12 months was 6.5%. If you recall, last year it was 7.5%. And so I think at one point it got up to 9%, but the inflation rate for 23 is expected to be 2.8, according to Statistia, and potentially up to 3.3 according to Market Watch. So it just depends on where you get your information from, but we're looking at still having inflation next year. Sales and use taxes remain stable this year. We're at 58% of the budget, so we are on target. Expected increases in health insurance, we're looking anywhere from 4 to 8% range. Historically, the town has been able to absorb those costs and not pass that on to the employee, which has been greatly beneficial to the employee, especially in times of inflation like this. So as I mentioned earlier, depending on what our levy does, we've got 1 cent on the tax rate will generate $87,000. Market expects the Federal Reserve to have a few small interest rate hikes in the next year. Rates should hold steady for 2023 once that happens. Cost of living raises are always a factor. And that kind of wraps it up. We'll be glad to address any questions y'all might have. be disappointed if you did. Correct. At this point, the only thing we have is just the land. The studies would have to be done about what soils are there and what kind of structures can be put on place on site. Yeah, I mean, we're willing to apply for any grants that are available, for sure. I think there would have to be some research done to see what is available, and then if we would apply for it. I think one of the things you hear from us all the time, not that I'm doing anything, but I know, lost track. So one of the things we always struggle with in Winterville is obviously our per capita income is really high, and so that can tend to create some difficulties when applying for grants. But I will say, right now it's probably been the I've seen in my career where grant money is probably more readily available than it's ever been. So we're certainly willing and prepared to go after any grants that we can. So the reason it's worded like that is each resident has, garbage and then recycling. And so that's a combination of the garbage and recycling. So each address would, right. Yes, ma'am. Sure. So once we get the engineering done, we'll have a better idea of exactly how to phase it. If we get the $7 million grant, obviously we would try to go ahead and knock the whole thing out and not phase it.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Railroad Street and the area of Noble Canal we're looking at rehabilitating or stabilizing are two phases of the overall project, if I'm not mistaken. I think there were a couple of other phases in that total drainage basin area project. I'd have to go back and check, maybe.
Well, the preliminary, yeah, so there was a study done and they broke it down into different sections. I don't know that they were ever prioritized as to what sections to be done when. Most of that would be driven by the flow of the water and the impacts it would have. For example, when we did the Chapman Street box culvert, we got the grant for that from the Golden Leaf Foundation. And we started out there instead of up here and found the culvert. We got $1,094,000, and that was not enough to really correct everything up here, but it would open up downstream. So
That's a component of that overall project.
correct.
That's
So-
already done.
So So as we get closer to it, we'll certainly bring that back to you so we can get a better handle on the phasing and how it affects the project, along with what money we have available to do so. There has certainly been some conversation about that. I think we were probably leaning toward seeing if there was somebody we could contract with, so it's not actually an employee of the town, but looking for somebody.
Sometimes, hello, y'all hear me? Sometimes, yes, you are correct. I think the challenge with us is what grants are we able and really stand a chance of getting? Trying to weigh the possibility of actually getting those funds versus paying someone to do that with regularity. It would just need to be drilled down into, and I don't think we've done that. Go to, the scoring mechanisms do not always take into account the tier 1 status of picking.
I will say there are opportunities, like for example, the Safe Across the School grant has in the budget normally accepted in the application that they fund a position, part-time position, or pay a contractor to manage. So there are opportunities, like you said, to build it into the grant. So if that grant's only a 3-year grant, probably lose for that.
I think it goes without saying the public, police, fire, EMS, rest, they're, I mean, they're already maxed out. So what does that look? But that's just one of the many needs we need to discuss from a public building. So as you can see, we're doing really well as a town financially. We have a lot of really big needs that are coming like growth and expansion. At some point, yes. So when we say that's an unfunded high priority, I believe that was the group that it was put in. That's unfunded from this report. So any associated with getting that property ready for the council's vision of what that multipurpose facility looks like. There's no
Thank you, Evan. You're in good voice tonight. Yeah, we have spent quite a bit of time looking at the cost. The good thing about the electric component is it's normally reimbursed to the town. The bad part is you got to front the cost. Talking with our engineers as recent as this morning, we think that cost just for the electric utility is going to be in excess of $1.5 million.
Robert, because we were under 10,000 population when this project started, is there still a likelihood we'll get reimbursed for those costs?
That is my understanding. It absolutely is, and we've discussed that both with our engineer and with DOT.
It's also my understanding that at 10,000 population over, DOT no longer reimburses for utility relocation. So that was a large change for us moving forward.
Unfortunately, we won't get that opportunity again.
That's right.
And most of our work will be done in-house, is that correct?
No. That is very highly specialized work. It'll require extensive bores, very large diameter wire cable, very specialized type work, both in the substations and in the field, and it'll require larger equipment to install that type thing. A good rule of thumb currently is $1 million per mile of transmission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Also on the EMS stormwater staffing, what does it take? Are we looking for a full-time position or a part-time position?
So,
Or
so we'll be addressing MS4. We'll get in, it's undetermined at this point in time how much manpower will be required. So we've got to establish our program, develop what the protocols are going to be, and then review how much data is going to have to be manually entered into the federal system and federal reporting and things of that nature, if it's quarterly, if it's semi-annually, if it's annually. A lot of these things have all of those. And so a lot of this, as we move into it, so I think we just adopted this, don't hold me to it, but roughly around June of last year. So the adoption of it and then implementation, kind of two different stages. And so once we get into this a little bit more and start sharpening the pencil, get a little bit more refined, we'll have a better understanding of what all of our responsibilities are going to be. But there's definitely going to be a change in what our responsibility is with regard to stormwater. So I don't have specifics for you right now, but we will certainly, as we get closer to implementation, it's not, we're not having to implement by April, but it is coming in the near future.
And my last is the area of concern. Focus on the street improvement. And talk about looking at what 10 years down the road. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more? So I think my question is, can you project? It's hard to project how long if you do a repair on a street and then when you have to go back to that same street again, unless you're speaking of traffic. Basically, it's the traffic. What really destroyed the street is.
Well, that and how it was constructed originally. So the soils that are underneath, the amount of rock that's underneath, and then how much asphalt's down, and then age, and then your traffic. So you put all that together, and that's where you get any kind of utility that's underneath can create weak points, especially from a stormwater standpoint. But we have, and I haven't had a chance to delve into that recently, but we have received a street assessment from Mr. DeJesus and with the MPO, and so we're going to be reviewing that and probably bringing back to the council a list of streets that are considered failing, and they've got a grade for them. But we also see from day to day when we're out riding around areas that may have worsened since that study was done. And so as we move forward, depending on how the council wants to move forward, we can certainly bring back a list of streets. I mean, if it's something that y'all are interested in and willing to borrow money for, I mean, it's just literally a level of magnitude on, what y'all want to do.
But you did say that the biggest cost comes from when it's close to the railroad, is that correct?
When you get close to the railroad, your costs skyrocket because you have to, it has to be engineered, it has to meet CSX. Since we have CSX here in town, I think other railroads are not quite as bad, but anytime you deal with CSX, it becomes very expensive. I mean, we had a 1-week project at the end of Church Street, and I think we had right at $10,000 in that, with bills from CSX, so they could have people on site while we were doing 1 week's worth of work.
Approximately how many feet? Speaking of from the railroad out.
I want to say it's 50. Does that sound right, Cliff? 50. 100 foot, yeah, so 50 on each side. If you get inside that easement.
Good general rule, if you're working on your railroad, there's a repair on site, he can find you $2,500 every time I walk across that railroad. They have rules.
And to give you insight, most of our downtown corridors is within the railroad right of way. On both sides. Right.
I mean, that's what we're seeing. Yes, sir. I mean, that's an estimate. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see, but those are what we were able to glean.
One of those entities that keep up with levels of inflation.
This grant money, is this, set aside some kind of real, that money come?
In which project are you referring to?
Oh,
Any of them, so basically grant funding is what I would consider project specific. And so it would depend, most of them are, every grant's going to be through a different entity. And so they'll have different regulations and stipulations. Am I answering your question?
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure I get you what you.
Working on.
We're doing a whole lot of moving around tonight. Cemetery, you don't see that included on your vision setting because we want to try to round that out, wind it up before the end of this fiscal year with it up. Any hopes and prayers? Yes. Weather permitting, we should be able to be open for business well before the end of the fiscal year. That
We didn't have a
on, you did, y'all voted on your pricing, yes. And we'll get that, once we get close to being ready to sell, we'll get, a reminder out to council about exactly, I'm sure you have people that ask you about what the pricing is, what the regulations are for purchase, what the regulations are. Remember, you all voted there'll be no erected headstones in the Section 2. It'll all be, flat markers. We want to look into companies that we can, either the funeral homes handle those, purchase those like they do in Greenville, some of them. We want to get all of those together, and we don't quite have all of those, and we still have some work out there in the ground. Now, having said that, we're probably going to look to be rocking the drives currently. We don't have any money set aside in the budget for paving of those drive extensions, so just know that you'll see that at some later time, but we're not going to let that hold us up from proceeding forward. Does that give you everything? Is it chilly? Okay, we'll see if we can make some adjustments.
Going back to the recreation funds, I think I asked this question years ago, and I'm asking again, it's right here in front of me now. We were saying that 72% of recreation revenue are transferred from the general fund. 72%. Is that only here in Winterville, that's all around for as we know?
I was just going to say, in general, recreation programs are typically supported by general funds in various areas. Normally, the fees associated with programs don't cover total cost of operating the program. Evan, do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure, yeah, no, I'm good. So, Councilman Moore, you see a variety of operations as far as the amount of transfer from general fund to recreation operations or parks and recreation operations. Obviously, it's done differently everywhere. I will tell you there are in existence very few parks and recreation departments who do not operate completely on their own revenues, but they operate primarily on their own revenues. Now, what you see there is significantly higher recreation participation costs for user groups, and it is an extreme rarity. There's only one example in the state that I can think of offhand right now. The vast majority is you do have a fair amount of revenue generated by program fees, but the vast majority is transferred via taxes from the general fund.
On that same subject, what percentage of these towns pay?
I've never personally.
We subsidize the
Yes, sir. I mean, I've never analyzed what other towns or what percentage of their budget are contributing to recreation. So I don't know if Evan's got any.
Again, I don't think that you're going to see any one thing across the board. What I will tell you is, again, the vast majority of parks and recreation operations across the state and across the nation are funded by taxpayers. Again, you can look at different thresholds, different cost recovery models. By and large, I think that what's the right word I'm looking for here? The general rule of thumb is you raise fees to a certain extent and then you hurt participation, by and large.
There are other entities that have lots of fundraisers and things of that nature with recreation commissions and stuff like that, that actually, here in North Carolina, you don't see a whole lot of that.
Go ahead, Robert.
I will tell you, in another town I worked in, not too far from here, we sent out a survey to companies that were looking at relocating and developers. And we had a list of 20 things. We want to know what they deemed most important. And we got 19 pretty quick. Number 20 we struggled with, and we finally agreed to put in parks, rec, and open space. When we received all the comments back, the one that we put in last scored the highest. The developers and industrial clients want to see that parks and open space. That's how important it is. So.
No, I just wanted to remind council, and Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, we started tracking Parks and Rec as a separate fund several years ago in order to try to better proportion out, if you will, the monies that we bring in through the various fees and concessions, et cetera. So I would think that in most places, my experience has been, you'll just see them as one of the general fund departments in most budgets. So.
Well, I was just concerned about that from the budget. What I see in that's I see all these big activities.
I think it doesn't have to be with everything one thing for itself.
Mr. Terry? Over to you. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you. And if y'all have any other questions after, tonight or clarification, feel free to reach out. I'll definitely be glad to talk with you.
Anthony did a great job. Miss Manning has agreed to be my computer clicker as we go through this short PowerPoint. You're going to see a lot of things again that we've already touched on in Anthony's presentation. But again, one of the purposes of our meeting tonight is to go through our vision setting for the town, and clearly want to try to set our future moving forward. What is future? Well, the future depends on what we do in the present, and Mahatma Gandhi said that, and I think we could all agree that what we do today and in the next coming months really is going to decide what kind of future we have as a town. Okay? Keep in mind that my lists are not in any particular order. So I'm just going to go based off of last year's discussions moving forward where we are. So obviously our goals and projects that have been goals and projects continue to be. That is hiring personnel, increasing employee diversity. We've made great strides in our hiring process since a year ago. However, we've had changes as those new folks have come on board, other folks have left. We've made some, restructuring decisions. Having said that, that's always going to be a point of a goal and a project for the town. Continue, we've already started since last year, but continue formulating our succession planning. Making those decisions about training and who will take the place of those folks as they leave us, retire, etc. We want to keep a focus on downtown redevelopment through our downtown beautification efforts and plans, our parking project that we're trying to get started again. Take our Market on the Square plan, in which we'll be resharing that with you all in the near future. Part of that contains some parking changes and also some lighting changes in the downtown area that are predicated upon the market plan, as well as any parking changes that we make. Two of the things we think is important to continue how and better ways to communicate with the public involve a website redesign. We're really just starting to begin that. Haven't really gotten very far yet, but we're working on a committee and moving forward. And also continuing with implementation of a town app and a citizen notification system that will give citizens additional ways to communicate with the town that doesn't involve the standard email and/or telephone. Now, public buildings, don't let this list scare you, because there's probably a lot longer than just this list, and I have to thank Chief Moore for throwing it together quickly. But Anthony touched on it. We built some really nice buildings all simultaneously. Well, we're many years out from that, and as it stands, we've got some large-scale things we have to address. So these are, certainly this list is not all inclusive, and actually you may see that we could probably move some of these around with in and under several of the buildings. But Town Hall, Library, Operations Center, Public Works, Electric, as a utility and also as a department, as well as fuel pumps, they service all of the departments. They sort of stand out there on their own. But as you can see, we have large-scale needs in all of those categories. Public safety, roof needs. We're getting ready to, down at the Op Center, we have a quote, an insurance quote, that's in and around $30,000, I think. 2730 at that point, but that's only going to take care of part of the roof. That roof has been problematic since the building was built. We really need to take a holistic look at that roof, and that's not the only roof that we have ongoing problems with. We don't have a plan for you this evening, but you'll start to see some large-scale budget amendments and requests in and around our buildings. Okay? Our list continues with items, some of which we've already discussed, but they will need to continue to be discussed. How do we meet the needs in and around our additional town growth? That's related to employees, that's related to services, that's related to, again, our buildings and ability to house people that are going to be needed with equipment to bring forward these services. We still need to undertake a strategic plan for growth. That got some traction in the beginning of last year, but then with a multitude of things going on at the league and elsewhere, it sort of got sidetracked. So certainly that remains an important piece of our plans for the future. We've talked about it tonight, our multipurpose facility, taking those next steps, but also cautioning council that if we built a facility tomorrow, we don't have any staff to run it. So those other costs that go along with that will be huge. Looking at additional park facilities, including the west side of town, as the mayor likes to remind us, but that also encompasses additional costs, employees, equipment, etc. Additional lights at Hillcrest was something that has been brought up several times. walking trails, sidewalks, street repairs, street rebuilding, things that Anthony was delving into in his presentation. How do we take those needs, our current, it's got some age on it now, but walkable Winterville plan, and how do we try to take a look at making large strides in those areas? Again, our Railroad Street Noble Canal Drainage Basin project, that's going to have large-scale costs associated with it, as well as other stormwater projects. We've got our current utility rate structure and the things that we've done and will have to continue to do to maintain that and to make those changes that keep us in good financial standing, as well as our capacity and our rates and where do we move forward with that. I wanted to give you a note. I was doing some calculations and Commissioner Mark Smith here, he's chairman of CMSD, as well as Mayor Hines is on that board with me. For fiscal year 22-23, our contribution to CMSD was $1,142,866 out of a total budget of $2,977,545. That our portion and Aiden's portion for 22-23 was very similar. That is because the preceding 12 months was a wet year, and those numbers tend to be higher for Aiden when it's a wet year. This current year that we are in is a drier year, and therefore you're going to see our percentage increase fairly substantially. As it stands right now, all things considered, as of December 31st, we can anticipate to see right at a $300,000 increase in our contribution for fiscal year 23-24. Now, that's large. However, what that tells us is that's how much flow. We're sending 48.23% of the flow of the plant is coming from Winterville. We know this because we installed all of those flow meters to show us exactly what we're generating. That's not to say none of that is infiltration, inflow, otherwise, rainwater, the stuff you don't want to send to the plant. However, I will say that this is a substantial increase, but at least it's ours. We're generating it, we're sending it. We'll have to continue to work on our infiltration, inflow, and make sure we keep that under control. So we're only paying for what we actually send there. But that's something that we're going to have to work on, and CMSD is getting ready to continue to undertake big projects as well. Then we've got our services that we need to take a look at. Future services that we need to add, as well as amending the services we currently have. We need to have a large, specific discussion about what that looks like and what it's going to take manpower and equipment to continue to provide those. Okay. That was quick. That's a lot in a few slides. Anthony did and Jessica did a great job of going over more specifically some of this information, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Sure. Yes. It is on the list. No. What we're really hoping is that we can, through some of our economic development efforts, find someone to bring an electric charging station to Winterville so that the town doesn't have to build one. I know Stephen's been working with folks. Robert reaches out when he hears of other places doing those kinds of things. But certainly we know it's becoming more and more important to a lot of people. We continue to work on that. We're just hoping that it'll be a partnership as opposed to something that we have to take on solely ourselves. Yes. Ideally, it would be a supercharging station, but those would not be free. However, it would certainly entice people to come to Winterville because I believe the closest one currently is Kinston, if I'm not mistaken. They do? Okay. Gotcha.
Art, can you tell me approximately how many personnel positions
I can give you a guesstimate, but I can certainly send council a more specific number. I would say it's probably in the 10 to 15 person range, though, across all departments. Mhm. Yes, that includes all departments.
My second question is, on the right side of it, we're speaking of increasing employee diversity. What is that area that we need to, probably need to increase that?
I don't think it's, I mean, it's something that council has decided that's important to them. It's important to staff. I think we try to make an effort to increase it across all departments. Yes, we're taking those efforts to work, but again, I remind council, when we take an application for a potential employee, we don't ask what gender, what race, what ethnicity, any of that on the application. So again, we do our best to try to recruit when we can, certainly retain at all times, and try to find ways to continue to increase the diversity within our workforce, and I think we've made great strides.
Mr. Parker, where are we at as far as,
Yes, applications have been taken. An actual process has been put in place. So it's a matter of taking that and putting it together over the next few weeks. That'll be in conjunction with the Parks and Rec Director's position. I'm talking about from a management team level standpoint, and trying to get those done. And Finance has a couple of positions we're really trying to back up, regroup, and hone in on as well. Well, since we're putting it all out there, we also have 2 more, at least, management team positions. Those folks will be retiring this year. So they will be huge processes to undertake as well. And that's, if it's okay, guys, that's within our police department and our electric department. Yes.
Let's keep them on board with
So the processes for those 2 positions are already being put together as we speak. I'm not rushing these gentlemen out the door by any stretch, but I want to be prepared.
sorry to hear that.
As am I. But I'm excited for them. It's well-deserved on both sides. No, but I assume you would know who I'm talking about.
But as a general, and I'm pretty sure y'all have already, nutrition, all the departments.
Yes. Well, I don't plan on that, but what I do want to, I want to stress is that current positions, absolutely unequivocally extremely important, but we're at that precipice, if you will, to move forward towards looking at what we need to expand some of these departments. When you look at what's on board to be brought into town, and I'm talking about already approved either new developments or phases of current developments, we're already stressing some of our departments and their ability to cover. So at some point in the very, very near future, we need to talk about what that looks like.
Also, too, I think I just earlier to ask the chief, over on the west side of town, is there any potential for anything over there?
I can speak for Chief. please feel free, but I mean, that's, you know, in terms of a substation, that's currently under consideration.
Coming back to downtown area. Comments that I have received, we love what we have done in our downtown area. We have brought here for entertainment and loving, family type setting. The only concern that they do have is our lighting. They said, please, please, if you can, do something about your lighting so that we can be able to park, because we do not have a lot of parking space close next to the businesses. So at night, they'll have to park a little bit further, so we put that on our radar.
It is definitely on our list. Well, we definitely know that that's important to council, it's important to us, and that's also a large-scale dollar item. So we want to have something to bring to you, knowing that we need to take a look at how to better light our downtown and how to do it in a more appealing fashion. So,
Well, Terry, I just got a text message from someone. It says they in the Winterville district, but they get the utilities from Greenville Utilities. Is there any kind of assistance with Greenville Utilities like provided here in the town that they can utilize?
I will certainly reach out. We can reach out to try to find out what programs they do have, or a contact person for Greenville Utilities.
And the other question, well, of course, the program is still available.
Yes, again, now to remind folks, you have to be 62 years of age or older, own your home, and be current on both your town and county taxes. That's the town's program. You can receive up to $5,400 in assistance for what is classified as urgent repair. So that's kind of the 5-second overview of our program. We have not, over the COVID pandemic, really been doing any of that kind of work. I currently have a phone call out to Rebuilding Together, and obviously needing to set a meeting with, I believe it was Konania folks. Yes, to see if we can get this ramped up to try to do some things in the spring.
Thank you.
Yes. No, that's great. I'm glad somebody's watching. That's right. I'm done, so.
Got a motion? All in favor? Give a second. All opposed? Got a second by Councilwoman Robinson. Motion was made by Councilman Tony. Vote was unanimous.